Hello, guys. Welcome back to another episode of the Strongman Winner Circle podcast. I'm Nicholas Canby. This is episode 33 with today's guest of Tyler Young, recently coming off his podium finish at the Clash of the Rockies. Other accolades of Tyler's include a two-time Clash Final Finalist, has also won his 105 kilo middleweight pro card by taking second at Strongman Corporation Nationals in 2021. He's the man behind the grade 8 performance. Tyler Young, thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So Tyler, tell us how you feeling after it's been about 3 or 4 days coming back from Denver and getting back acclimated. About how you feeling about your performance?
I'm feeling pretty good about it. Denver allergies kind of did a number on me, but aside from that, feeling pretty good. Feeling pretty good.
Now, how did you manage the altitude when it came to the differences there?
I honestly am not sure that I noticed a big difference. I did take an inhaler with me because apparently I've got exercise-induced asthma now, so I just take it everywhere I go. So I did hit that a couple times throughout the course of the day, but aside from after the medley, I was pretty well okay. So.
All right, excellent. So in terms of course, going into the contest and all, how was your training leading up to it? Did you feel pretty confident? Did you put a good string of training sessions together?
Yeah. So I hit my goal numbers like pretty early on in prep, so I just kind of cruised. The last couple preps, I usually try to crest my heavy stuff at about 2 or 3 weeks out, and then I basically just do pump work, leading into it, bodybuilding type of stuff. That way, I feel really good going into it, and that's kind of what I did this time. Um, I went back to training Brazilian Jiu Jitsu about 12 weeks ago. So I was on the mat 3 or 4 days a week on top of, my strongman training. So, I felt, a lot more conditioned and a lot more limber than I usually do. So I definitely think that, offset the extra training volume that I was looking at with, training both of them. So.
Oh, interesting. Now, were you doing it? How far leading up into the contest were you doing jiu-jitsu? Did you stop at any?
Like Tuesday or Wednesday was my last day training jiu-jitsu leading into that. So.
Oh wow! All right. And then we doing like 2 days lifting and then.
Yeah. So I try to space it out to where my work schedule rotates. So I'll do 3 days of lifting one day or 1 week, and then 4 days of jujitsu, and then it'll flip the next week. So I'll do 4 and 3 the next. But sometimes just life happens, and I'll have to miss a training session one day or another, and I just stack it on and hit a 2 a day later in the week to make up for it, kind of deal. So.
Ooh, busy man.
I prefer I prefer to train 7 days a week. I prefer to stay moving. I don't sit still very well. So.
Makes sense. But I would say, especially kind of competing recently, I know you've been ramping up your gym, ramping up your coaching business. You're a competitor, you're a husband, you're a father, baby on the way.
Right.
How are you able to put all that together?
Just force it, man. I don't really have a choice. Like I just, I try to wear all these different hats, and I'm invested in this and I'm invested in that, and I can't just pull back. So I just have to find time. So.
So, good time management and just in a
Yeah.
good attitude.
Yeah. So.
That's excellent. So I had one of your clients on, your buddy Nick O'Hare, recently. So
Yeah.
that was on the I Love the 90s episode. So he was mentioning that you're still pretty light heading into these 105 kilo contests compared to the rest of the class. Now, have you been slimming down on me, or you've been more?
Honestly, just with the extra training volume and being back on the mats and stuff like that, I've trimmed down a little bit. So I went to Denver weighing like 222, 223, something like that. In fact, I was kind of messing with Andrew Clayton the night before, kind of trying to get in his head a little bit, because he came to the room to check his weight on the scale, and he was like 231.0, and I stepped on the scale, and I was eating like a sandwich and drinking a Pedialyte. I had it both in my hands, and I stepped on the scale. I was like 226. And he was like, man, I don't know. Should I have like a rice cake? And I was like, well, you might be able to, but what if the scale's heavy tomorrow? And he was just like, ah. So I was just, having my little fun there, but he had his fun Saturday, so it's okay.
Yeah, it's great to see him back on the fold. Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah, and we'll see. Like his knee was a little swollen after the competition, but we'll see if that holds up for the rest of the shows. I know he wants to do Americas, he wants to do Worlds,
Yeah,
OSG.
I hope he does. He's a game competitor, man. So.
So yeah, that'll be a lot. That'll be a lot of fun. So, of course, kind of moving on. So I have quite a few questions I had prepared today. I know I always use you as a kind of a great example as someone that's had great success in the sport by competing often. And now you're probably in somewhere around like the 40s when it comes to competitions completed.
I think Denver was my 38th. I'll
38.
have to double check my list, but I'm not in the 40 yet. I'm in the upper
All right.
30s.
So, all right. So close to 40, which is still, even high 30s is still a great accomplishment. Now, why do you think it's important to compete often? Of course, I've mentioned it on here before, but of course, I always want to hear your opinion. And then
I,
also, and then following up from that, like, what would you tell athletes you coach if they're trying to shy away from a show? Why is it important to compete?
well, so I like that sweet spot of 3 or 4 times a year. If I could, I would only compete probably 3 times a year at this point, just because everything's so heavy. When I first started out, it was nothing to compete, 10 times a year. Like I competed like that a long time, just because they were local shows. I was trying to get better. I was trying to get my name out there. But now everything's so heavy, and everything means something, right? So I think last year there was, we did Waco on 9-4. We did America's Strongest Man in like 927. And
Mhm.
then I did Nationals like 2 weeks after that. Like it was just like bam, bam, bam. So, on one hand, I don't like to compete that frequently, but on the other hand, you can't pass on the opportunities if they're there, at the level that we're at. So I hate to, turn shows down. And, I say that even though I'm going to have to turn down America's Strongest Man this year and it's, 45 minutes from my house. It's going to fall that way this year. But, so you kind of have to find your line, and I don't know if you talked about it with Nick. I have it queued. I just finished your Trey Mitchell episode, so Nick's the next one that I'm listening to. But I have to do a lot more reining him in than I do letting him eat. He would compete every weekend if I let him. He just loves getting out there and loves competing, which is great. But at his level, I have to kind of keep him reeled in because I want to bring his best package for OSG or for Clash of the '90s or wherever he decides to go. So.
Yeah, we might have talked about you a little bit in that podcast, talking about some of your 400-pound logs, some of your diets in the past. I think you mentioned a little bit, of course. I'm not sure if you've kind of changed it up recently, especially with doing all the jiu-jitsu training. But I remember you were saying that you don't want to shock your body with too much healthy food right before a competition. That would just throw you off.
Yeah, most of that is just kind of playing around. I like to take a hard stance against a friend of mine, Anthony Deal. So he posts all this, nutrition stuff, and I just like getting on there and trolling the shit out of him. So he's like, "Eat this, this, this," and I'm like, "No." And then I'll tag him, and like anytime I have a cheat meal, like I'll tag him in a post. And I'm like, "You can have it both ways," but that's just, I eat clean more often than not. Probably about 85-90% of the time, I'll eat clean. So.
Now, what do you follow? Are you doing like the similar to like the probability coach? Do you try to do like something like a vertical diet by staying effort in?
I honestly just eat what makes me feel good. If something makes me feel like shit, I don't touch it. So most of it's just about making sure I'm getting enough, especially with my training volume and how active I am. I have to make sure that I'm, eating enough calories. So as far as, counting calories or macros, I don't do that. It works great for some people. It makes it too much of a job for me, and I don't want to feel like that. So.
That makes sense. And yeah, I think it's how much time you want to put in all of that, and again, the time you can dedicate towards it. Um, so a little bit kind of circling back to, so I'm not sure if you listened to the kind of the Mitch Hooper podcast, but talking about kind of competing often, it was interesting because he talks about kind of exposure theory. So he didn't have that many competitions leading up to World Strongest Man. World Strongest Man was actually his fifth strongman competition ever, but he had so many great experiences in various sports. So he did,
Mhm.
of course, like hockey and American football, golf, bowling, and then I think he named two or three other ones, marathon running and things like that. But I think we've kind of talked about the past, so I'm transitioning into the kind of next question. So I wrestled for a while. Of course, I know you loved your wrestling. So do you think so? Wrestling, you usually sometimes get anywhere between 50 or 60 matches a season, depending if in high school or in college. But do you think wrestling is a great sport in terms of heading into strongman? And like, what has wrestling done for you heading into heading into strongman?
Honestly, not just strongman. I think wrestling prepares you for life better than any other sport. Because at the end of the day, it's an individual sport, but you still need your team to thrive and succeed. And that's exactly, kind of how life is. Because it's not always going to be everybody else out there doing your road work, or drilling hours upon hours upon hours. And I started wrestling really late in life. We didn't even have a high school wrestling program. I just worked with a local wrestling coach, and I'd done judo a lot.
So this is when you were like 16?
Right. So when I got into the wrestling room at Campbellsville, I was very fortunate that I had a coach that, as long as I was willing to work, there was a place for me on the team. So there were, 45, 46 of us, and when I first started out, I was the worst one in the room. And, but by the end of the season, I was not the worst one in the room anymore, so I'd made up that ground. And that just, again, I think that the hard-nosed workouts and, the extra time that you have to spend outside of practice really focusing and honing your craft is what sets it apart from anything else. Because you can get away with a lot in football or basketball, just being a freak athlete. Wrestling's not the same way. You can't, skimp on your conditioning workouts. You can't skimp on your strength training, if that's your style of wrestling, because you never know who you're going to wrestle against. You know what I mean? So we'll just put you on your nuggets.
Now, what kind of wrestler were you? Were you like a thrower? Did you like your double leg takedowns?
I much prefer counter throwing. I like anything from a tie, big on lat drops and stuff like that. That's my game. That's what I prefer to do, because it allows me to slow the game down a little bit. Of course, I wrestled, 149, 157 in college. So a lot of those guys were super quick, had those sweet singles and low singles and stuff like that. And I didn't like having to be forced into their game. So I would try to tie with them and keep them up so I could work my throws and stuff like that. So,
All right. So I'll make sure not to tie up with you. I don't want to be in your wheelhouse. But I've so in terms of the podcast, I've been able to gather a lot of information. So we had like Martins Lisis was a wrestler, Kevin Ferris, Terry Rady, Furman competed for a few years, myself for 10 years, Evan Singleton for 11 years. So
right.
so you see a good crew of wrestlers just hopping into the mix and again doing really well.
I've actually wrestled with Evan. He's got a pretty good base. I'd like to run it back, but I had a pretty good match with Evan before we both lost our breath.
Was that in your gym, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like a New Year's party, and he kept running his mouth like he always does. And I was like, "Hey, man, you ain't too big to get double legged." And I was like, "Knowing good and well, I'm not going to double leg that guy." But and he was like, "Well, pull up then." So we got to wrestling, and after we got done and we finally caught our breath, he said, "I've got to admit that didn't really go how I thought it was going to go." And I was like, "Well, same, but it was a good time."
You guys didn't have a mat, so like I always get worried if like whenever course I'm wrestling like that, I'm just gonna bang up my knees, and that's pretty much half of
Right.
wrestling was banging up my knees.
No doubt, no doubt.
So I imagine you probably kept living up to the name of World's Strongest Loudmouth, Mr. Singleton. I think I want to say Big Laws gave him that. But I did want to kind of talk about, of course, you kind of transitioned originally from like a 90-kilo athlete to 105 kilos. So back then, when we talk a little more specific towards kind of your strengths, you were dominating the press events, and now moving up a weight class, and now doing pretty well, and you won the log press this past weekend. Usually, what's your theory and approach to training when it comes to overhead events?
Well, I mean, kind of how your methodology is, win the press, win the show. Typically, the press is the first, event, that and or a deadlift. So, if I can get good points on the board there, then it kind of sets me up to know what I need to have for the rest of them. I wouldn't consider myself a bad mover, but when you overlay me across the division, everybody else is just so fast. So that's been the biggest deficiency that I've been trying to work on. And my press and my deadlift has allowed me, a longer time to build that, safely, if you will. So that's, press is the king, man. That's what I like to do. That's, nobody's going to ask me out in town, really they're going to ask me how much overhead press anyway, but nobody's going to ask how fast can you run a yoke? Nobody's going to ask that. You know what I mean? So.
Now, generally, you still incorporate a lot of bench press and that type of movement within your pressing. If you want to talk on that.
Honestly, I just enjoy bench pressing. Most of the time I do it with an axle. It shortens the range of motion just a little bit, takes a little bit of pressure off my shoulders, allows me to have more pressing volume throughout the week. Because if I'm really, really hammering my press, I'll press 2 or 3 days a week, um, leading up to whatever I'm working for. And then as we get closer to competition, then I'll take bench out and stuff like that. Um, like I think my last bench session was about 3 weeks outside of Denver. So.
All right. Oh, that's so it was also kind of interesting in Denver. You were split jerking. I would say each log. I know I think at the time, I think you knew that you just had to hit the 330 log to win.
Right.
But like for instance, if it was a little more of a race, would you been? I know you could easily Viper 270 and push press 300, but were you split jerking just to get the split jerk right?
Exactly. Right. I just want to be as efficient as possible. I don't know. Even if Clayton had a breeze through that, kind of how I expected him to, I don't know that I would have still Viper the 270 and the 300, just because I know how efficient my jerk is, and I needed 3 more events after that. So I feel pretty taxed after a heavy push press, but not so much after a heavy split jerk. I knew 360 was there. I took a 360 with me to Denver if I needed it. Thankfully, I didn't. That I could kind of save myself for the rest of the show. But yeah, I kind of went in with the idea that I was going to split jerk everything. So
Cool. Now, I know we talked off air, but if you had to do the 360, what would you tell the people? Was the 360 there that day?
oh, for sure, absolutely. Yeah, I was all about taking my time and just being efficient as possible. And that 330 did not feel bad at all. So
Yeah,
it was.
so unfortunately, hopefully there was, or maybe next time, if there's ever a
Yeah,
moment like that, there's a couple people that could push you. Maybe you just have to hop in the same event as Jesse, and maybe
right.
we'll see that 360. But I also want to stay on the topic of kind of like transitioning to a higher weight class. So you moved from the 90 kilos to 105 kilos. I think you did. Was 2020 Nationals your first 105 show?
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
So yeah.
So yeah.
So tell us a little bit about like the trials of tribulations of moving up a weight class.
Honestly, I don't feel like it. And we talk about this a lot. You and I have talked offline about it.
But
Me kind of.
we want to tell the people, all the amateur
Right.
listeners.
I'm just bringing everybody up to speed. So, we talked kind of us, me growing into the weight class, and it's hard for me to kind of keep perspective with that because I'm so competitive. So, 2020 Nationals was my first like big 105 show. Like I've done local shows and stuff like that. And I went down there. It was a stacked division when you look back at it now. Made a big slip up on the Husfeld Stone. Got like 67th on it, and ended up finishing in 19th. I was like, all right, well, back to the drawing board. So after that, I think was Clash. So obviously, better events there for me. But it's just you have to get more experience in the division and the people you're competing against, and know when you can leave points on the table and when you can't. And on a big contest like that, with so many people, you can't leave any points on the table. So.
But yeah, kind of going back to your thought right there, it was a very stacked Nationals just because it was really ASM and then Nationals were the two big contests that year. Especially there's nothing in the world, so like everybody put their other marbles into either one of
Yep.
those two shows. So yeah, we saw a lot of great performances and even a tie for first place.
Right.
um,
Right.
so 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 on that, so for instance, when you decided to move up the weight class, did your diet change? I know you're probably maybe cutting down to 90 kilos and now you're trying to go up a weight class. Did you increase the volume? Did you add extra meals throughout the day?
Not really. There at the end of my 90 career, I was a pretty big 90. I was probably 213, 214, which is a big cut for me. I don't like to make that kind of cut. And around that same time of the year, I got on TRT. So it kind of made gaining weight a little easier, if you will. So that was, probably the biggest paradigm shift as it was, moving into the 105s. I could probably still make 90 now, with as light as I am. But, I wanted to move to where the opportunity was, and the opportunity wasn't at 90 then. They didn't have a pro card at 90. I wanted a pro card. I wanted to say that, and it's kind of delineated now. It means a little something different than what it used to, but it still means something to me. You know what I mean? Like I worked for that. So, I'm thankful that I earned my pro card, if you will, but I wouldn't have done that if I'd have stayed at 90 or 200. So,
No, it makes a lot of sense. Now, do you have any tips for anybody moving up a weight class?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of everybody moving up the weight class. I don't know why. I was talking to I was talking to I think Chad and Clayton about it this weekend, and they were talking about people making these big weight cuts from like 265, 270, and I'm like, bro, at what point do you just say, hey, I'm fat, I'm gonna stay up here? Like, I do strongman because I enjoy it. You know what I mean? Like, I enjoy going out lifting logs, deadlifts, and all this other stuff. I don't enjoy cutting weight. Like, that's not part of my deal. And 5-10 pounds, not a big deal. But these guys that come from like 275 and 280, like, at what point are you just a heavyweight? Like, the name of the game is not, cut weight, man. It's strong, man. If you're not strong enough for your weight, get stronger. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe I'm
Uh,
weird.
That's a great take. I think, yeah, for some
Yeah,
people resonate, especially. I know Clayton has been able to cut weight and done really well. But I've seen so many instances where people have cut weight and
right.
had a not a good time. So,
And that's not a slight against anybody that does these weight cuts. Like, if you can do it and be successful, then good on you. That's just not my, you know, that's not what I want to do in the sport. I would rather compete up, and I would rather, focus on being strong as opposed to focus on, playing with my chemistry and manipulating salt and stuff, that last week or two. So that's just me.
I like it.
So
So here, let's move on. So of course, in your own experience, and then when you're advising your own clients, what's the best way and different tactics to train week events? And then in the past, what's worked for you?
so for a long time in the division, my Achilles heel has kind of been my grip. So I just trained the hell out of it. I would train holds, I would train hangs. I don't know if you were paying attention to the grip wall that I was putting together, but I trained my grip in just about every aspect that you could, the extensors, the hubs, the pinch grips, like everything. And I spoke quite a bit to Jed Johnson, I think is his last name. I'm talking about the really crazy grip guy.
Yes.
And he was like, that's not really going to benefit your farmers. And I was like, well, it's not just about farmers. Like, I need the hand strength for everything because I got these little baby hands. So, I just built it from the ground up, and now I don't really worry about grip events anymore. It was the same thing like that. I was leaving a lot of points on the table, stone loading. So, I tore my technique down and then, fixed how I load, and now I don't really have a problem with that. So you kind of have to do the things that aren't fun.
That makes sense. Now, of course, you made the grip wall, you're doing more frequently. So is it more like, for instance, on the grip, were you adding more volume, or
Oh yeah.
or more frequently, or for instance, would you do like
Oh,
farmers and then follow up with like assistance workouts in the grip?
well, more so, I went from just training, farmers weekly or biweekly to farmers on the weekends, and then, I'd have like a dedicated grip day throughout the week, and then honestly, the biggest thing that helped me both at home in competition was the little M tugs, like the bottom digit fingers, because anytime that I'd lose a farmer, it would peel out of my pinky and ring finger. So I got those little M tugs, and I would just, work them all the time. So now I take them to all my contests with me and warm up my hands, all my individual digits and stuff like that, before I touch farmers or anything like that. And that is honestly what I think has helped me the most is just those little bitty. They look like miniature Captains of Crush. You know what I'm talking about?
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a pretty good piece. And then you touched upon it, but again, doing stone loads for, again, someone that's maybe a little shorter in the class. What are your
Yeah.
recommendations?
You got to get your feet together, and you got to get as high on your chest as you can. I know a lot of people have a lot of success going 10-2. I think you load that way. I prefer to keep mine closer to 9-3, and I front squat it up, because I'm not gonna, encounter a stone that I can't front squat, that I can lap anyway. Um, so I just looked at other short people and how they loaded, specifically Dimitar. I went to a Dimitar seminar, and he does the same little front squat thing. So I don't really move my hands. Once I get my initial grip, I sit back in the lap and I'll reach further, but I don't move them up, or go over the top or anything like that. It just helps me get a better extension, I feel like.
No, excellent. Yeah, and for you guys who don't know, Deminar Semitinov was a two-time American champ, originally from Bulgaria, right?
Hmm.
And he, of course, started in the sport doing circus lifts, so which is a
Yeah.
pretty cool background. Um,
Yeah.
so Tyler, of course, this little segment is generally kind of the more kind of like frequent questions that I like to ask within the podcast. But within your kind of your strongman career, so when did you originally start?
I started August of 2015 was my first contest. Um, it was just a local USS show. Showed up, did the 198 Open class. They ended up grouping us with the 220s, and I got my ass handed to me.
Huh?
So
So that
it
was
was
your first.
exactly.
So when did so like within your, of course, starting strongman or even throughout your career, but like at what point, or some people say it's a progression, but or for some people, for like for me, I say I can localize it to a certain event
Mhm.
or contest. But when did you realize your potential in the sport?
Man, that's tough. Um, so there have been a couple things that have happened over the years that have kind of, pointed me in this direction. So my second contest, really great, pioneer of the sport, Richard Bros. He's from Memphis, Tennessee, pulled me aside after the Stone event. And he's like, hey, he said, I know you're brand new at this. He said, but I think you have a whole lot of potential. He said, I think you really need to stick with it. I really like your grit more than anything else. He was like, obviously you're new. You don't really like, you don't have a whole lot of the top end strength yet. He said, but your grit is going to take you far in the sport. And I really held on to that for a long time. Then I went to OSG. I was always right on the cusp of of
And then
winning.
for the listeners, what year is this OSG?
2017, the first year I went as 90 kilos. But leading up to that, like I felt like I was always on the cusp of winning a show. Like I hadn't even won a show, I don't think, by the time I went to OSG. Maybe one, and I mean like not a single first place. But I was always like right on the cusp, and then I'd lose it on yoke, or I'd lose it on stones, or it was always something that held me back. My game wasn't complete yet. And then I went to OSG and I tied for 10th and lost the count back.
Mm.
And that just lit a fire. We've talked about this, but I've lost so many countbacks to silly shit, man. And I'm just like, this is not going to be what my career is defined as, is, always being right on the cusp. You know what I mean? So I just dove, like, just doubled down. The next year didn't really go. I started winning shows. The next year I cut to 80 kilos at official strongman games, which was a mistake. I shouldn't have went down that
This
far.
is 20. So this is 2018.
Yes, yeah. I think I got 16th that year. Now, granted, the 15 people that beat me were incredible. They're still, doing very well at 80 kilos. That is a deep, deep division.
That's the
Um,
Nate. Is that when Nate Green won?
Yes, and it's kind of funny. I was chopping it up with some of the 80 guys this past weekend at Denver because I competed against all of them at OSG, and they're like, "Why didn't you stay at 80?" And I was like, "Well, after the medley, Nate Green stepped over me. It was like the most disrespectful thing ever, like Kobe Bryant did at that basketball game. He stepped over me. I'm like laying on the floor. He said, 'You should have stayed at 90.' And I wasn't even like offended. I was like, 'No, you're right. Like I have no business here. Like I'm doing bad. I just had I did too extreme of a weight cut is what it was. And then came out flat and just couldn't recover. But no, Nate was exactly right. Nate's the reason I don't stay at 80 anymore. So not dodging him. He just had some good advice.
So you're saying, so of course you always were on the cusp. I always say that like fourth or 11th place is probably the worst placing that you could you could always get.
And as well as I do, there's kind of levels to this stuff. So I was talking to my client Jimmy Harris about this. I took him to Denver with me. He had a couple little mishaps. Ended up finishing 12th out of 13th. But dude has tons of potential in the sport. And I was like, look, man, you have to keep perspective. I was like, my last 5 contests, I've got like 5th, 7th, 2nd, um, 9th, and then 3rd. You know what I mean? Like, so it's been all over the place. But they've all been, that 5th place finish was at Clash. That 9th place finish was at Clash. That 7th place finish was at ASM. So it's just gonna be different. It's gonna vary event to event. Once you change levels, and that's what I was trying to explain to him. Once you go from this, local show to nationals, it's a different ground. And then when you go from nationals to the Clash series or wherever or ASM, it's different again. So you can't value your finishes the same, at least for a while. So
That makes a lot of sense. And I think some people get wrapped up in terms of like looking at the exact place and like, oh, I was top 10 this year, but I'm not top 10 last year. But the events were totally different, right? So those top 10, those when you got top 10, those events suited you. And when you didn't, those events were you got better at those events, but they again you weren't as strong as the other ones. So I think it's sometimes again having that perspective is very important.
Exactly. Exactly.
So Tyler, when you started out, now were there any kind of strength athletes or strongmen that you really admired, like that really give you like inspiration? So for instance, when you think of this answer, like I think I was talking to Mitch the other day. I looked up to like a lot of like Olympic lifters. Of course,
Right.
it was like Zadrunas and Zadrunas and Marius, but then I got really into like Halfjord and Thor, and then got really into like all the other. And then like for instance, I had even my first contest, I had like Rob Kearney as a judge, and
Yeah.
and he is from Massachusetts. So the media then I had some like I was in someone's shadow,
Right.
and then someone to look up to. Um,
Uh,
Now, who were some of the guys that you were looking up to when you first started? And again,
prob-
this could be all sports.
Probably Marius. Honestly, I think we all grew up, kind of watching the Dominator on TV, and I was like, man, I'm pretty sure I can do that one day. And Yanni Virtanen was another one that I really, really enjoyed watching. These were early on. Once I got into the sport, it was a little different. Obviously, we were all cheering for Brian Shaw. I always wanted to see an American win. And now it's, there's so many likable guys in the sport. Kearney's a good example. Bobby Thompson, Trey Mitchell's super likable guy. There's so many people and they're so down to earth. Like I haven't met, too many people that I just would like I wouldn't be around you in public. You know what I mean? Like there's not too many of those at the sport, especially at that level. So that's a breath of fresh air, if you will, because I'm not so sure other sports are like that once they get to the top. But as far as I wouldn't really say anybody from any other sport that I really uh, really forced myself to look up to and stuff like that. Most of it was just strength athletes.
No,
So
it makes a lot of sense. And then you're talking on Trey. Of course, we just had Trey on, and he's someone
yeah,
that needs a little more exposure. He has so much to offer, and I encouraged him to kind of ramp up his YouTube. So I'm excited to see if, of course, if he
for sure.
takes up that advice. But overall, Tyler, when everything's all said and done, what you're looking to achieve in the sport?
I mean, I think at this point we're all just looking to see what kind of imprint we leave. You know, I've kind of laid the foundation that my clients, I'm going to pass the torch to them. Realistically, I've got a few more years of competing, and then I'm gonna head on out and pass it to the new generation. You and I have seen a lot of evolution just over the last couple of years in the direction the sport is going, and I honestly couldn't be more excited about the direction that it is going. The increased pace, like it doesn't really pay to be fat and sloppy anymore. You have to hammer your weaknesses. You can't have a bad event. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that it's been kind of streamlined and forced into an actual sport. I just hope that I'm able to be around to, enjoying some of it, and we've already enjoyed a little bit of it, being on Clash and stuff like that. Um, so I feel like we're very privileged to be here in this, transitionary period is what I think it's going to be, at least for the next few years. But my imprint on the sport, I want, 10 years from now, they're like, well, remember this guy and, grade A performance is still out here doing its thing. And, we show up to a competition, everybody's got a gorilla on their shirt and they're like, oh shit, here we go again. That's what I want. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, absolutely. So are we ever going to see you maybe taking a bump at the heavyweight class, the heavyweight ranks?
who knows? Maybe. I don't know. I thought about doing the Arnold this year as a heavyweight just because I looked at the weights and I was like, oh yeah, these are in my wheelhouse. It was like a squat and a heavy axle ladder. I was like, oh yeah. So, but
But this was one the right before class, right?
right, that's why I didn't do it. It was too close. So
Yeah, I think I've done 3 amateur heavies. I think there's one of these times I want to give it one more ride, one more consistent ride. So that's always a great benefit for us 105 kilo pros um, that usually that we're always able to kind of just kind of skip the qualifications and be able to go into that show.
yeah,
So I encourage if any of you 105 pros are listening, that's always a great show to hop into.
yeah, man. I wish they'd let us do heavyweight ASM. I would do that.
I want to say right now in the current Strongman Corporation system, if you have a 105 kilo pro card, you can do the qualifiers, but then you gotta qualify to go to ASM. So technically, you could, like, for instance, like Bobby did that one show. There's been 3 shows altogether so far, but I'm pretty sure we can hop into those. So maybe something to chew on, right?
Yeah, they're at the Olympia now. That sounds right up my alley.
What?
Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, Vegas is fun, man. Especially with all the strongman in Vegas partying in the casinos. But coming up, Tyler, I actually have a special surprise for you. So we're gonna take a quick commercial break. So don't go too far. All right, surprise, Tyler. We have Justin Loy. You're, of course, one of your fellow competitors, but it's also great when not only when competitors are doing seminars together, but they are, putting their heads together. So yeah, tell us about your new seminars coming out.
Well, we're pretty excited. Justin and I, kind of how I was talking about to you, we have very different training ideologies. And I funnel all of my nutrition clients to him already. So, it just made sense. We're pretty different body types, and we have pretty different strengths in the sport. So, it just kind of made sense for us to kind of team up, if you will. So, yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. Pretty excited.
Yeah, same. I think it'd be fun for us to branch out a little bit. I mean, we've been together for a few years now. So, we can show everybody how well I do at squatting, and we can show everybody how you can 400-pound logs.
Yeah, we're pretty good at those together.
What's the agenda? What are you guys teaching?
I know at PS we're going over circus dumbbell, and I think axle clean and press, and the shop that I remember hasn't gotten back with us on what exactly that we're going over. Do you remember, Justin? Or does that sound about right?
I remember Farmers being in there somewhere.
Yeah, Farmers maybe at the shop.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're still working out a few details.
All right. What's the best way to sign up if someone's interested?
So we've been sharing this little flyer. The easiest way is to, go to the sponsors that are down at the bottom and shoot them a message, and they'll get you squared away.
All right. Excellent. But yeah, I always kind of recommend, especially with these seminars, it's a Q&A at the end, so kind of a all holds bar, let them ask anything, because usually again, they're always good questions, and it's good practice for us to kind of answer tough questions on the spot, especially if they're in different contexts. So I always find those probably the funnest part of the seminars.
Yeah, sure.
So in general, so we're just kind of wrapping up. Of course, appreciate Justin kind of coming on. So yeah, what's on the rest of the horizon for you, Tyler? What do we have to look forward to?
So we have another baby due October 21st. So that's going to kind of put a damper on things, if you will. With that said, I'd like to do Static Monsters on the 29th of October. So we'll see if I can sneak away for that long enough. Aside from that, I may pop in and do a Uss Nationals Qualifier after the first of the year. May look at going to Uss Nationals next year again. And then obviously, all roads end in Clash. That's what I'm looking for more than anything. So.
Yeah, cool. And then Justin, while I have you on, it's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Yeah, how's the body feeling?
It's hanging in there.
Excellent. Yeah, hope to see you back on the field soon. So will we see you competing soon? Maybe at OSG?
Yeah, I think that's the next one I got lined up. Probably, yeah. Trying to get ready for that. See how the next month goes. Kind of dialing some things back and doing a bunch of rehab and stuff. So
now, will you guys be stopping by ASM? At least I know you guys said you're probably not competing, but at least stopping by, say hello.
So I've got to be in a wedding that weekend. Old Marine Corps buddy of mine, I missed his first wedding, and I was like, "Look, man, if you ever get married again, I promise I'll be there." And here it is. So it just happened to fall that weekend, but I'm a man of my word, so it sucks being so close to home. It's only like an hour away, so a lot of people could come down there and watch and stuff like that. But is what it is.
All right. We'll maybe cross our fingers and maybe next year too. Tyler, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you?
That is on Instagram at Tyler Young Pro Shortman. Facebook, obviously, Tyler Young. I'm pretty approachable. Shoot me a message, got any questions. When we take a look at something programming wise, I'm available. So.
All right, excellent. And then if you're local, can anybody stop by your gym, or is it a private
Absolutely.
gym?
Well, we are, exclusive and kind of close to the public. You have to know me or have somebody vouch for you that I know personally for you to be able to come in the gym. But, you're passing through, you want to come in, get a strongman workout, shoot me a message, and, we figure something out. So.
All right, excellent. And then also don't forget, Justin does a lot of course nutrition. If you guys haven't seen Justin's episode, which is our Talking Nutrition podcast a little bit ago, that was a big hit. So make sure you check that out. Justin and I do on a regular basis. I make those drinks now, and that you encourage me to be more healthy in terms of adding lemon and greens and beets. I still haven't done the cranberry. I haven't got off my ass to actually get the cranberry, but I have all that stuff.
Cranberry going. That's where it's at.
But
hey, are you gonna hit a 300-pound dumbbell at ASM?
You know what? Once the goal is the actual record, which is going to be 282. And then if I'm feeling froggy, I'm going to leap. So
yeah, nice.
So we'll see. Hopefully, everything lines up. But if my body's willing, I'm going to do it. I'm going to put on a show.
I like that mentality. I've failed a lot of 400 logs with that mentality right there.
But guys, don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when the new content and new episodes are coming on. Make sure to follow Tyler. Make sure to follow Justin. Tyler, thank you for coming on. Justin, thanks for popping in. And Tyler, you have the last word.
Hey, thank you for having me. Shout out to Cerberus. They're doing a whole lot in the sport right now. Funneling a lot of money, time, and energy into, everything that's going on. So they've been real good to me. They've been real good to the sport. That's about all I got. So be better, people. Get out and get after it.